For the longest time, it felt like, the global situation was pretty straightforward, almost like a one versus the other kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
But lately, if you're paying attention, that whole narrative seems to have fractured. We're seeing some pretty serious shifts in who's calling the shots.
Absolutely. That old idea, the West versus the rest,
Mhm.
it just doesn't really capture what's happening now. It's much more complex.
Yeah, way more complex. We're seeing these distinct power centers emerge.
Each with its own agenda, its own influence, they're really shaping the future in different ways.
And that's exactly what we want to dig into today. We're looking at two, well, really pivotal developments that highlight this. The big expansion of BRICS and the way the AUKUS Security Pact is evolving.
Right. Think of them as key signs, maybe, of where things are headed globally.
These aren't just, abstract theories floating around.
No, not at all. They have real impacts on trade, on tech development, on security, everything, really.
So our goal today is to try and cut through some of the noise.
Yeah, get to the core of these changes and figure out why you should probably have them on your radar.
Okay, let's dive into BRICS first. Now, originally this was, 5 countries? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
That's right.
And their first focus was mainly economic financial collaboration, wasn't it?
Yes, initially it was heavily weighted towards, boosting trade between themselves, seeking more financial stability.
But their aims grew bigger over time.
Definitely. They shared this aspiration for a louder voice in global decisions, more influence.
And then came this major turning point, the recent expansion. Between 2023, 2024, a whole new group was invited.
A very telling list of invitees, actually. It really showed the growing pull of BRICS.
Who are the key ones?
Well, you had Saudi Arabia, Iran, the UAE, Egypt, and Ethiopia invited. Argentina was on the list too, but as you said, they opted out later.
Right, due to politics back home.
Exactly. A change in government there.
So, looking at that expanded list,
Right.
wow, you've got huge energy players, Saudi Arabia, Iran. Big economic hubs like the UAE and Egypt. And Ethiopia, a really important African nation.
Mm-hmm.
What's the main driver behind bringing this, quite diverse group together?
I think the core motivation seems to be about boosting their collective clout on the world stage.
Okay.
And frankly, to act as a kind of counterweight to the historical dominance of Western nations in global institutions.
You mean like the IMF, the World Bank?
Precisely. Those bodies have traditionally had, let's say, significant Western guidance. BRICS wants a more balanced global financial setup.
And we're seeing actual steps towards this, right?
Yeah.
All this talk about de-dollarization, setting up their own financial system.
Yeah, exactly. Now, widespread de-dollarization, that's a very complex long-term thing.
Sure.
But the fact they're actively talking about it, exploring ways to trade more in their own currencies, that signals a clear intent.
To rely less on the U.S. dollar.
To reduce that reliance, yes. And then there's the new development bank, the BRICS Bank.
Right.
That offers another funding option for infrastructure, for development projects, not just within BRICS, but potentially beyond.
And adding Saudi Arabia and Iran, 2 energy giants, into BRICS. That really shifts the geopolitical picture, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It effectively turns BRICS into a major energy bloc.
A counterweight to existing energy groups.
Potentially, yes. It gives them significant leverage, especially in energy markets. It adds a whole new layer of complexity to global energy dynamics.
And boosts their collective bargaining power, I imagine.
Definitely strengthens it.
But we should remember, BRICS isn't like a perfectly united front, is it? There are tensions inside the group, too.
That's a really crucial point. It's not monolithic. You've got these pre-existing frictions.
Like India and China.
Exactly. The border disputes between India and China, those are significant internal challenges.
And Russia's situation.
Russia's international isolation adds another complex layer. And, there's always the potential question of China's sheer size.
Its economic and political weight potentially overshadowing others.
Right. Could it end up dominating the agenda? That's something to watch.
So even with these internal issues, what's the big takeaway from this BRICS expansion? What's the main message it sends?
Symbolically, it's huge. It's a powerful signal from a large part of the global South.
Saying what?
Saying they want a more active role, a decisive role, in actually shaping the rules of the game globally.
They're not content just being spectators anymore.
Exactly. They want a seat at the table, setting the terms of the global order, not just reacting to one defined largely by the West.
Okay, so that's one major shift, looking at it from the BRICS angle. Now, let's flip the coin. How are some Western powers responding, positioning themselves? That brings us to AUKUS.
Right, AUKUS.
Can you give us a quick recap of what AUKUS is about?
Sure. AUKUS kicked off in 2021. It's a strategic defense pact, Australia, the UK, and the US.
3 key allies.
Yes. And its initial big headline was about getting Australia nuclear-powered submarines.
Which was widely seen as a move aimed at China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific.
That was definitely the main interpretation, yes.
Wow.
Bolstering Australia's defense capabilities in that specific context.
Right, the subs got all the attention. But it feels like AUKUS is moving beyond just submarines now, especially looking towards 2025.
It is, and that's where it gets really interesting. The scope is widening quite a bit.
How so?
We're seeing a much stronger emphasis now on collaboration in really advanced technologies.
Like what?
Things like AI for defense applications, quantum computing, beefing up cybersecurity cooperation, and even working together on hypersonic missile tech.
Wow, okay, so AI, quantum, cyber, hypersonics, that's a serious tech focus.
It is.
So the message behind this broader AUK seems to be these 3 nations pooling their tech strengths
Pooling resources, combining expertise.
to develop and deploy some very advanced military capabilities. And the goal is still primarily countering China in the region.
That appears to be the core strategic driver, yes. Leveraging technological superiority to maintain a balance of power in the Indo-Pacific.
Making sure they have the top-tier tools to counter potential threats.
Exactly, to uphold the existing security framework as they see it.
And China's reaction to AUKUS as both its start and its expansion, I'm guessing not welcoming.
No, not surprisingly. China sees AUKUS as a direct challenge.
To its strategic interests.
Yes. And its response has been to, well, strengthen its own ties.
With who?
With countries like Russia, Iran, and also engaging more with nations in Africa, building its own counter-alignments, you could say.
And this squeeze, it must put smaller countries in the Indo-Pacific in a really tough spot.
It does. Think about the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia.
They trade a lot with China, right? Huge economic links.
Very significant economic ties. But they also have real security concerns.
So they're caught in the middle.
They're navigating this incredibly complex balancing act, trying to manage their economic relationship with China while also looking for security partnerships, often with the West. It's a delicate calculation.
A real tightrope walk. What about India? They're a major player there, but not in AUKUS. How are they seeing all this?
India's approach seems to be one of, let's say, careful strategic observation. They're watching closely.
But building their own partnerships.
Yes. While not in AUKUS, they're actively strengthening other alliances. The Quad is the big one, with Japan, Australia.
No AUKUS member.
Right. And the U.S., of course. So India is pursuing its own path, promoting regional stability and addressing China's influence through a different grouping.
Okay, so let's step back. We've looked at BRICS expanding, AUKUS evolving. If you put these 2 big trends together, what's the big picture? Where are we heading?
Well, connecting those dots, it really points strongly towards a more multipolar world order. Meaning the era of maybe 1 or 2 dominant superpowers is fading. Instead, we're seeing a more complex map with multiple regional powers and strategic blocs carving out their own spheres of influence. It's more distributed.
And BRICS and AUKUS, they almost feel like they represent competing visions for what that future order looks like.
That's a really good way to put it. They do seem to embody contrasting approaches.
How so?
BRICS, with its expansion and its focus on finance, seems aimed at reforming what its members view as a Western-dominated system, creating alternative structures.
While
AUKUS seems more focused on reinforcing a specific kind of order, tech-driven, rules-based, centered on security and innovation, primarily led by Western allies.
And then you've got all these other countries kind of trying not to get pulled too strongly into either camp.
Exactly. A lot of nations, Turkey, Brazil, Indonesia, many across Africa, seem to be prioritizing what they call strategic autonomy.
Playing the field, so to speak.
Engaging with different powers, different blocs, but trying hard not to commit exclusively to one side. They want flexibility.
Which makes the whole picture even more complex.
Definitely complicates things. It underlines that move away from simple, binary, Cold War-style alignments.
So we're left with these huge questions, aren't we? Where does this all lead? Is this multipolarity going to create some kind of new balance?
Or does it risk more instability, maybe even conflict?
Yeah, is this just intense competition we're seeing now, or could it be the lead up to something more serious down the line?
Those are the critical questions, really. The answers aren't clear yet. It depends on how these different blocs and nations interact in the coming years.
That really shapes the 21st century.
It absolutely will.
Okay, well, that brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've looked at the major expansion of BRICS and the ongoing evolution of AUKUS, two really powerful forces reshaping global power dynamics right now.
They really are undeniable factors in how this century is unfolding.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Yeah, perhaps thinking about the long-term stability of this emerging multipolar world. You have these distinct blocs, sometimes competing, all striving for influence.
Will that push towards cooperation eventually, or just more friction?
Exactly. Will the pursuit of national or bloc interests ultimately lead to finding common ground, or will it just increase tensions? That's definitely something to keep thinking about.